Okay, good.
Yeah, what is the smile? Is it a lot or is it doable? Or I see that a lot of people are watching the study sessions.
Oh yeah, it's really good. They are very helpful.
They're helpful. Good. Talking
Yeah,
in the classroom, that one.
yeah. All videos are very helpful. Thank you, Doctor. Yeah.
That's good. I'll keep doing them. I'm sorry I've been a little behind in the grading. I'm catching up today. What I haven't done, but editing these videos takes me a lot of time. But I think it's very important to have them made, because that's sort of a part that was always missing when we were just online and not at all in the classroom. Good. Are there any questions that you guys have up front, or concerns, or things that a little raunchy on my end? Or
Well, I have a question that's not really part of what we've been studying.
okay.
Sorry, I just swallowed something.
Oh, that's all right.
Excuse me. So muscles develop by what I've always heard is muscles develop by doing hard work, and the muscles tear down and then rebuild. But as I sort of learned last week and was really enthralled with, was how muscles actually function. And then I don't understand how muscles build, what actually tears down, what breaks down.
Yeah, I don't even know if that philosophy is still true or not.
I still read it though. And so what makes muscles stronger, I guess, is my question.
Well, yeah, I mean, it always is a response to the stress, right? That makes the body respond. I actually haven't followed that discussion for a long time now. What exactly is it that the breaking down and then the rebuilding? It did make sense to me. And what I would think that tears a little bit are some of the must be molecularly the actin-myosin molecules that rip a little bit. And I'm sure the fascia does too. I mean, this fascia responds to the different stressors, and so that's more the layers on the outside. They have found in fascia measuring thicknesses, because that has a lot to do with the pain syndromes, like the back pain and stuff. How well is your connection from the muscle into the bone made? And they found that people that stress it in multiple different ways, like construction workers, for example, have much thicker fascia than people who work out in the gym and do like treadmill kind of workout, where it's very repetitive. So I know the fascia must be a component too, that however it gets atrophied, however it grows, but I don't know what exactly tears. But clinically, I haven't read up.
Right.
Good question, though. I should go and investigate that a little more at some point.
Maybe I'll do some.
If you come across, ship me some stuff, whatever you find, I'll read it and then I incorporate it.
Right.
Very, very good. Any other questions? Yeah, anything. If not, yeah.
I like it very much. All the about the evaluation of the posture.
The exercise.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Thank you so much, and it's very helpful. And yeah, all the.
Yeah, this is one where it's a little pandemic thank you in some way, because I did that workshop for married faculty one time when the pandemic just started, because everybody started sitting. And then I'm glad you like it, because I know some of those are a little bit draggy, and we are getting into a little bit one that takes a little more time, 2 weeker, because now we're going to go into injuries. So now we're going to get into muscles more. And so when we look at muscles, we look at strength. When we look at injuries, and also stretching, like how flexible are we, right? Those are sort of the two things. So that's good. And in terms of that, did you guys get through the muscle function chapter, the physiology part? How did that go for you guys? Any questions? Anything that was a little hard?
No.
I
No,
found
that
it
was-
amazing.
That's pretty straightforward. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. When I look at it, let me just see if anybody else has any thing, just speak up, okay? Please don't hold back, just interrupt me. The thing that I think is most important in the muscle physiology chapter is first to understand that on that very small molecular level, what really happens is that these organelles, the myosins and the actins, they work with each other, and the myosin attaches to the actin and pulls the actin closer to it, and it moves ratchetly like the two ends get closer that way. And then the other thing I think that's important is to understand here that the ATP gets used in this cycle, the sliding filament theory cycle, where we have the head gets re-put in a position where he can then attach to the actin and passively, so you're thinking of a cock in a spring kind of thing, and then passively pull on the actin when it gets attached to it. So the ATP gets used in this section here where the myosin head detaches, and then it gets re-put into a high energy configuration. And that's what we call that ATP hydrolysis. That means you're using the energy. And then that's that cycle that keeps going. And you got a gazillion of those things. Do I have a slide here that shows the gazillions? Yeah, maybe. Maybe here you can see all of these little dots. The red ones are the myosins, and the blue ones, not these big ones, the bluer ones inside are the actins. So they're all around. And this is not even a whole muscle. This is just a little part of the muscle. And then all of these together become a muscle fiber. And then a lot of these muscle fibers becomes a muscle that we then say this is a muscle. So there's many of these tug of war kind of things going on here. And the other thing that I think is crucially interesting is the function of calcium. Calcium is on a molecular level. When you look at this is the myosin head here, this is then the actin. Calcium actually has to remove a strand, another organelle, another little structure, has to remove molecules, has to remove that from the active site that it covers. When you think of active site that it covers, you think of magnet, like, you know, you want to bring two magnets together. The myosin head is very strongly attracted to that blue, that black dot here, actually, in the blue, on the blue actin. And the calcium is what is necessary to remove the restriction, the band that covers it, from those black active sites, that then when they are removed at that point, then the myosin head can attach to, or that's a passive process. That's why I use the magnet analogy, because that part is passive. But what's interesting there is if this calcium is not present in this situation, there is no muscle attachment. So calcium is really the element besides ATP that's absolutely crucial for making these muscle function and attaching them, the myosin heads, to the actin so they can work against each other and bring the muscle closer, shorten it. Muscle, all muscle does is shortening, actively speaking. It just shortens. It's an elastic shortening. When it stops shortening, it gives a little bit, so we get back to the resting length. But the active part of it, where the ATP is used, what the nerve impulse tells the muscle, that's the shortening. That's this thing. And the nerve impulse, actually, what the nerve impulse does, interestingly, it activates these bags that hold the calcium. When we look at them here, these are those blue structures. The yellow structure is the nerve impulse. Yellow, when you see yellow in anatomy stuff, you think nerve. We see blue, you generally blue, not calcium, generally blue and red, you think cardiovascular. In this instant here, the blue represents the endoplasmic reticulum, a specialized form of endoplasmic reticulum that only holds calcium, that doesn't do anything else. So it's just a bag of calcium, and we call it the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And so that's where the calcium holds. So the nerve impulse tells those calciums to leave into the space where we have the actin and the myosins, and then that's where we have the contraction happening, because the calcium makes sure that the actin and the myosin can connect with each other. And then when the nerve impulse stops, or the responsiveness stops, the calcium gets sucked back up into these bags, and then the active side on the actin, the magnet part, is going to be covered again, and we cannot have the myosin head attached to that active side. And so that's really the crux of this anatomy physiology stuff. If you get that, if we put some more words to it, if you want later on, but if you get that level of the muscle physiology of how muscle works, you're doing really well. All right. You guys clear with what I'm talking about, or is that all a foreign language?
No, it's clear.
Pretty all right? All right, good.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Now, and then, you know, for the rest of this chapter, we can leave it up to you guys processing. And if there's questions, you know, reach out to me, ask me, because the other chapter that I really want to talk about are the muscles. So let me see here. I got to open the muscle chapter. There we go. There we go. And then in all my ditziness, I did not take my term list out. So let me get that. It seems like it's helpful if we go through some of the terminology. Is that correct? Yeah. Otherwise, you can stop me. I don't have to. But it seems like a lot of you guys are watching those videos. So that's a good sign. So when we look at the muscles now, the actual muscles we can touch and feel, we start with the trunk muscles. And I need to take my term list out here. So what you want is you want to have the, whoop, there you go, the term list printed out, or at least on an electronic device on a format, and you can grab that term list. Let me show you again, if you haven't seen that yet. Let me go to Safari here. Let me go over here. So if you look at modules, this is the teacher one, so it has a few more things than what you need on it. But after muscle, down here it says test 2. If you go test 2, test review, this first tab here gets you to a term list that looks like that, where all the terms are on one page. All right. And then, but all the terms are already in the different exercises as well. So that is already there, but that's just where you have it on one, because on the test, all you're responsible for is those terms on that term list. For the homeworks, all you're responsible for is label that term one time on one of the pictures, or create your own pictures. Or I've been having, Umberto sends me videos that I got to put up somewhere, because it's like it teaches you the whole thing. It's so involved. But, you know, whatever helps you learn the material, that's where I want your creativity to go. That's what I want you to think. Think about how your studies go, how you best study. Anyway, then also there are the review videos. These are old videos that I go through all the terms on models. But then what I'm now doing, the study sessions that we create during the sessions that we go to the lab. Tonight, again, we do one. Those are also set here under study sessions. I'll put those in there too. I'm also sending these videos just on a text, so you guys can see it if you want to. Again, everything is the same list, the same material from different perspectives. And the study sessions, I'm trying to bring in a little clinical from my experience at work, because a lot of the stuff is not that complicated. It's just maybe applying it is complicated, but understanding how the body works is not that complicated, at least not movement apparatus stuff. And then I also have pictures of models. I'm not going to push here, but that brings you to pictures of all the models I use on the test. Those are the same models I use on the study sessions, because in the study sessions, I can point to things in 3 dimensions. And so make use of that. You know, don't think like you got to study everything that's in those things. All you need to know is the term list, but all the extra information, the extra time of working through it will help you remember it and internalize it, which is much more important than remembering it mentally. Internalizing is much, much more important. All right, anyway, that's my blurb from that. So now let's go back to the trunk muscles, because these are my favorite chapters. Muscles are my favorite chapters. Let's see. Sorry, these are just the PowerPoint, so there's a few extra pictures. So if you look at the list, now we're going to the 3rd column midsection where it says muscles. We already did down to the masseter, which was the facial muscle. So we already did the facial muscles. So we're actually already having all of these 3 columns mostly done, and we're down here at the bottom of it where we're going to pick up the axial skeleton. I mean, the axial muscles, the trunk muscles. So when I look at the trunk muscles, I look at the muscles. When I want to section them, I look at muscles in the neck area that sort of hold the neck together, hold the shoulder blade onto the neck a little bit. That can get into all the upper extremities already. When we start moving the shoulder blade around, the shoulder blade is an appendicular joint or bone. When we look at axial, is the vertebral column, the ribs and the sternum, and then from the clavicle outward to the shoulder blade, that's considered extremity, appendicular skeleton. The same is true for the hip. In the hip, we have, well, not the same, but when we look at the sacrum is part of the axial skeleton, and then the hip bones, the pelvis is the appendicular skeleton. So, you know, when we get to those interchanged areas, it sometimes the muscles are a little interchangeable. So I'm not making a list and going like, oh, which muscle is part of this part of the system or this part of the system. It's more just a way of grouping the muscles together a little bit. So when we look at the list here, the first one that I see is the trapezius muscle. And the trapezius muscle is a really cool muscle. It's a big one. Most of us know about it. It goes from the top of the neck all the way out to the back part of the shoulder blade, the spine of the scapula, actually. And also in the front a little bit, it wraps around and it goes, see, you could see it here a little bit, how it wraps around and it goes to the 1/3 of the clavicle as well. So it wraps around here, and then it goes all the way down, all the spinous processes. Here you can see that, all the spinous processes throughout the thoracic spine. So it's a really big trapeze-shaped muscle. So that's the word, is from a trapeze in the geometric configuration. So that's that muscle. It does a lot of stuff. When we look at here, the trunk muscles, we look at what does it do to the trunk. So it works on the head. So it can tilt the head to, if this one pulls over here, it's going to tilt the head over to the side, to the same side. Also in both of them, see, you actually only see it on one side. On this side, you have the underneath muscles. So you have to sort of visualize that it's on both sides. But if both of them contract, you pull the head back, you extend the head. And then if one of them again contracts, it brings it laterally. But also, depending on which fibers contract, you can have some rotation onto the neck, and it would pull this way, so it will turn the head to the opposite side. So the nose will go this way if this muscle contracts. So that's a little, more visually complicated, but that's how biomechanics works. You want to visualize the stuff as well as you can. And these are pulleys, right? So you're thinking, oh, this is attached here and here. If this contracts and shortens, what would happen? And most likely, yeah, the neck comes down. But the other thing is, in this muscle, more likely than the neck coming down is the scapular motion, and the shoulder blade can rotate upward. So we will learn some of that when we do the next week, the upper extremity muscles. From a terminology perspective, in most terms are in the bones. So from like labeling things, that's the biggest chunk. When it comes to the muscle, it's a little more difficult to understand what the muscle does. It's not just a dot. It has action as well, and it has attachments. But the attachments and the actions are really for us to learn to then understand and be able to label the muscle. You are not responsible on the test to do anything other than label the muscle. So that's the trapezius. So that muscle, you can definitely label that. Then the next one that's on the list is the really cool one. It's the sternocleidomastoid, or SCM. Sternum. And this one is, it's just a long name. It seems like, wow, really, complicated. But the name is in the attachment. So you see sterno refers to sternum. So here, that's the sternum, the front breastbone. So that's right here is an attachment. Cleido refers to the clavicle. That's right here. That's the clavicle. There's the other attachment. So it's the belly, two bellied muscles, two attachments. And then mastoid is behind the ear, the bump behind the ears. Actually, it's not just a bump. It's a pretty wide, large attachment site. This is the ear hole right here. So behind the ear is where that goes. You can point it out on yourself if you look at the action. And one of the actions is, interestingly, if this contracts, you see, like you visualize you have a bar going through the ear canal, and when it pulls here, it actually brings the head backward. It doesn't pull the head down. It rotates the head backward. So it extends the head. And it also tilts it to the same side when one of them contracts. So it helps the trapezius in the back with doing that. A lot of these muscles work together when they work. And also it rotates the head to the opposite side. So again, you visualize now the rod goes up and down here in the middle, that the head rotates around. So you visualize if this contracts, then the head turns that way. So that's the opposite. The nose goes the opposite way. And you can, this is a good muscle where you can point it out yourself. So you can take your head, hold it, and twist that way and resist it. And then the muscle slowly comes out a little bit and you can see it or touch it at least. So resisting a motion, resisting an action does help you learn where these muscles are. Well, not all of them, because it's hard to feel all of them, but where these muscles are in your own body. So that's kind of interesting. The sternocleidomastoid is a big, big muscle. A lot of people can have them tight. You can see it when you see pictures with people's neck and you see these things sticking out on the side, and their SCM right here, their SCM is pretty tight. And stuff is going on while she's turning her head. That's what actually the action is right in there that you can see. Yeah, but the SCM is actually also a muscle that has a lot of the blood flow from the brain goes down through it. And so when people have headaches, sometimes massaging this, you have to be gentle because it's like right in the throat.
Doctor,
have triggered. Right? Yes.
So when we are under stress and we feel a little tired or fatigue here, is just not just for the bad posture, could be otherwise tense these muscles when we are saying, oh,
well, when you look at stress response and tired, you're looking sort of from a nervous system way of a more fight or flight, a more reactive responsiveness, like what you need to have when you drive a car, for example, on the freeway. And so generally stress sits in the muscles, and the one biggest place it sits in people is the upper back and the neck. And so they kind of like go like that a little bit. And so then that tenses up all of the stuff here in the front and in the back. There is another place, and that's the low back, where a lot of people feel stress in their muscles.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. And I do feel, I mean, we're going to get to this next muscle, the scalenes, and the scalenes are right here in the front. So to finish up the SCM. So actually, a lot of drainage, venous drainage, vascular drainage from the head goes through the SCM. And so if the SCM is really tight, people get stasis of blood in the head, and sometimes it gets them a little foggy thinking and headachy. So that's an interesting clinical piece. So that's a muscle that needs to be checked. I need to check it when people come with headaches and thing, and is one of those places. But another muscle that's really, really interesting is the scalenes. And the scalenes are more visualized here and then here. So actually, let's go back. On here, we can see it goes, the scalenes go from the tip of the vertebrae, the transverse processes, to the rib number 1 and rib number 2. So they're going down and into the ribs. And so what's interesting with them is the arm is attached to the trunk, to the rib cage with muscles. But we use the arms a lot to lift things and to and do all kind of stuff. And so the arm pulls on the rib cage a lot. And so the rib cage often is a little bit distressed outward, downward, and backwards. And so often these muscles get a little bit extra stiffy and tight because the distance with the ribs going out and back is a little longer than it's supposed to be. And so the other thing that's interesting with this muscle is the fact that the nerves that go from the neck to the arms go and squeeze through them. And so when they get stiff, a lot of the times, clinically speaking, especially with office workers or people that hold their arms up a lot, like hairdressing people, for example, or also I think, I haven't seen it with Amazon warehouse work, which is also a lot of lifting stuff. But that pulls a lot on this joint complex. And a lot of times the nerve here gets squeezed by tight scalenes and then the arms get numb, like people get numb at night, for example. That's what that does. And it's a very interesting muscle. It's a very skinny muscle. It's like, if you touch it on yourself, if you get this SCM here, it's right next to it. So if you feel on top of the clavicle downward and you feel nuts, then that's that scalenes. That's that muscle. So it's a very interesting muscle clinically, and is important because it has that nerve squeeze going on. And so that scalene syndrome can happen quite frequently when we get numb hands. So that's the one that I want you to have there as from the list. And then we're going to jump a couple here. We're going to jump the really deep forward anterior muscles on the neck, the ones in the deep front. So not the scalenes were out here. Now, these are right on the bone. I work them clinically a lot on people, if people let me, because when you get whiplash, when people get like whiplashes, when whiplash happens when you're sitting in a car and somebody smacks you and your head is not attached to the headrest and it goes back, that's the whiplash. That front of the neck gets yanked backwards. That often tears muscles here in the front. And so what I try to do when I drive, I try to hold my head against the headrest and through that sort of retraction exercise while I'm at it, since we already talked about that, as I'm driving, and try to remember that, because if I get hit by somebody and my head is on the headrest, the fact that these muscles don't go back like that makes them not get injured. And so that's one of those, things. Of course, I forget, at least half the time, but I try to remember. So I don't need to have you worry about these are longus coli. They're very deep clinically. I put them in here and I lecture on them, but you don't have to remember them for the test. But they are really interesting muscles. And so the retraction exercise actually strengthens these muscles. That's actually a good part of that. And then we got the other ones, the muscles right underneath the skull here, the suboccipital muscles. Those are also 4 muscles that I bring in here as a lecture, but we don't need to worry about it for the test because they're really, really deep. But these are also very important muscles because very deep there, these muscles actually are attached somehow with the eyesight. And then with the fascia, the back line, the back has a whole thick fascia going up and down from the forehead to the sole of the foot, all the way down the thigh and everywhere. And these muscles work with that fascia and pull on it a little bit to straighten it out and direct motion patterns. You see that when you throw a cat up, or well, no, you don't throw a cat up in the air, but when a cat sort of flies through the air or something in a video, so they orient themselves with their head and look where what is in space, and then their body follows, and they very rarely don't land on their feet. And so that's what that muscle group does. It's very interesting, actually. But that's really deep. And so I don't need you to memorize the muscles, but I do want to talk about it like that because I think that's just fascinating to me. I had a patient, he flew through the windshield in a car accident and got so injured in his brain that he couldn't work anymore and Had all kind of neurological everything tests and gazillion things, but nothing really helped. When I worked these muscles very deep for like 20 minutes and really went deep and relaxed them and very slow and sink into the muscle, changed his life. It was, I didn't believe it, but he was like, he said his thinking got so much clearer after that. So you can never discount that kind of stuff. You know, you always have to try. If it's safe, it always has to be safe. Anyway, that's that. And then we have the semis. We don't worry about these either. That's the layer next up on top of the suboccipitals here. And then on top of that will be the trapezius. All right, but we have two layers. When we really look at them, just one goes sort of for the inside out a little bit, and the other one goes for the outside in a little bit, up and down. So they kind of cross slightly. And these are all they're responsible for the different types of motions. All right, but the muscle that I do bring up in the list is the erector spinae. And the erector spinae muscle is a group of muscles that are going up and down the back of the spine. So when you have somebody extend their back, you can see these two lines going up and down the back. Those are the erector spinae muscles. And these things here going up and down. Mine aren't that big. Although I did have one of my patients was a football guy for the Raiders. And I saw him in February, I think, after the season a little bit was over already. And they got kind of deconditioned a little. And back here was like, you know, regular you and me kind of bony stuff when I work on his hip. And then he went to practice for a month and I saw him a few times. And after that month, there was like a pad of like about an inch of muscle down in here. It's unbelievable how fast that thing grew. And he was, you know, in his mid-20s. So it's like super, super fast growing muscle stuff. So that's the erector spinae. There are three different, well, there are multiple different ones. We really talk about three of them. You don't need to know their name, but one is the spinalis, which is the one right next to the spine. That's why I call it spinalis, from spinous process to spinous process. That's how I remember it. If you go anatomy further, when you need to differentiate them. Then the other one is a longissimus. I'm looking at the word and say this is long. That's the longest one. It goes sort of a little next to it on the spine, up and down, all the way up and down. And then the next one further out is the iliocostalis. And I visualize that sort of coming from the ilium, the ilio, going up into the ribs, costalis, ribs or costals. So you don't need to know these for the test, but erector spinae, I want you to be able to point out if I point to it. But these is how I remember those names individually if you take it further. In the studies, all right, where are we at? We don't really talk about the multifidus. That's the deepest muscle. I do talk clinically about it because it is the muscle that if we have back pain or had back pain in the past, it weakens and it creates instability in the low back and a lot of pain on people. And it's one of those muscles. It's mainly this deep back muscle. If you look at the cross section, you see right here, that's the back, that's the front, that's the vertebra. It's very interesting because if we go and have a study done that looks at this muscle, this is not cadaver, MRI studies. It's a medical study, is actually an interesting. This is no injury. You see the muscles right and thick and dark is meat. It's the red part. And then when the muscle is not functioning, you see all this infiltration of white stuff. And white stuff is adiposity, it's fatty, it's scar type of tissue. It's not functioning, it's not contractile. It's not the same fat as we have in the belly and on the butt, but it's the same kind of non-function. It's non-functioning, so it's infiltrated. So if you see that, you see it's severe atrophy. Atrophy means it's diminished the muscle capacity. And so what's interesting is they have found that muscle is very important to stabilize and work and do the Superman pose, they call that, to strengthen when we have problems with the back, when we have back pain. The other one that's very often mentioned is the transverse abdominis. And if you go down the list a little bit, you see the second term from the bottom, it says transverse abdominis. And that's this muscle right here. You see it indicated. I'll have a picture later that shows it with all the other ones. But on this picture, you see the two ones that are really important for stabilizing the back, which is this multifidus, and then that transverse abdominis, which wraps around the belly in the front. It's a very skinny muscle deep inside, but it closes and it pulls the content of the belly inward, and it sort of creates that solid core trunk area that we call the core strength. You probably heard of core strength and how important that is. And core strength is important because if that core is solid and we move up here, we can move from a solid foundation and the arm moves, but not the whole back moves because we're not stable in the body. And so that's what that really does. And so those are the two muscles that are crucial for that. But let's just go to the abdominals real quick while we're at it. That's that transverse abdominis. This is a nice picture how you see how it wraps around it. And this is a good exercise to do if you want to strengthen it. You can also just do holding the stomach muscles when you lift something, which you should do anyway, not to put too much pressure on the low back. But that's that deepest layer, the transverse abdominis. When we go more superficial, we have a couple of muscles that go in and out and in, that cross over on the side of the stomach that really create a lot of strength around the abdomen here. Those are called obliques because they go oblique. We have externals and internals. The externals go from the outside inward, mostly, well, no, pretty much all of them. And so that's like when I look at clinic or when I talk in the class, it's like when you look at the fibers are like you put your hand into the pockets, they go from the outside in. And then the other ones, the internals, go from the inside out and they pull it down. So together, they're really strong pulling on those. And so those are very important muscles. And then on top of that, we have the rectus abdominis, and that's the six-pack muscle, although it's more like an eight-pack or something, but that's going up and down. What's interesting about that muscle is because we have these creating of the six-pack things, all these inscriptions in between the muscles, when this contracts and this contracts, it pulls both on this and this and this, so it contracts really strongly. So it's like 4 different muscles that contract individually, and the tendon in between is kind of like a stabilizer that then you can pull from. And so that's a really interesting concept with that. When you work that muscle, we often clinically talk about doing a sit-up that is just lifting the trunk up to like the hand reach the knees maybe, but not all the way up, just engaging these top ones. Because if we go too far down, we engage a muscle called the iliopsoas that we'll talk about next week or 2 weeks from now. That's deep in the front, that raises the thigh up, but it also brings the trunk forward, and that muscle creates a lot of back pain in people. And so clinically, if we engage these top ones in the core and these rec ab exercises, the sit-up type things, neurologically, all of them fire up. So if you just do work on the top ones, you have pretty much good firing on all of them. Just so that's another sort of tip that I learned hurting myself all the times. And then, so that's the rectus abdominis. And then from there, let's go upward and let's go to the breathing muscles. When I look at the breathing muscles, I'm really looking at the external, internal intercostals, and then the diaphragm. Oh, and the linea alba, I didn't explain that. Let's just go to that real fast. Sorry about that. See, in the stomach, you got this in between going up and down. They're not fibers that go across, they go up and down. And that line that's up and down in the middle of the stomach, we call that the linea alba. And so that's fascia that things can anchor into and hold on to whilst they pull. And so see these external obliques and the internals, they go towards the linea alba or from the linea alba outward. So that's that term. But then we get into the external, internal intercostals and the diaphragm. And the breathing is, when we breathe, all we really want to do is want to increase the chest cavity. And the chest is from here to here and from here to here. We want to increase the chest cavity, and the air will be sucked in because the lungs are attached to the chest wall. And so air will breathe in, air will enter passively when we inhale, when we increase the space, because the pressure is lower when we have more room, and so that will suck the air in. And so that's really breathing. So when we look at breathing muscles, we look at muscles that move the rib cage and move this space around. So the rib cage ones are the external intercostals. They go from the upper rib, the bottom part of the upper rib downward to the upper part of the lower rib and pull the rib upwards. So that's what those muscles do. So expand the rib cage to the side. So that helps increase the volume. So that helps with the breathing. And then we have a second one that helps with the breathing very well, and that's the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is, so the intercostals are on the side, but the diaphragm is like underneath. So it's like a dome-shaped muscle that goes all the way up and goes around the rib cage. And when it contracts, it pulls down, and that really enhances the volume of the rib cage. And that's belly breathing. And of course, in society, it's like, no, don't show up your belly, you know, don't do belly breathing and blah, 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 blah. So we got to think about that, because we want to bring this oxygen into the body, because the more oxygen we bring into this body, the more our recovery is, the more ATP we have, the clearer we can think and all of that stuff. So it does behoove us to do some belly breathing exercises that we're really bad about it and get us out of the head and do sort of our own biofeedback. So you put a book on top of your belly and then see it go up and down. Then you use your belly to breathe. All right, so that's that muscle. Good, and that's all the muscles that we need to worry about in this.
The doctor.
Yes.
The singers use that, right? The opera singers. When they
Yeah,
breathe.
a lot of that is breathing is a big component. Yeah, for singers, big component. Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like drinking water. You know, I think we're underestimating the power of those kind of fundamental elements, you know, in our body, and you know, like oxygen. That's why it's good to go out and have a fresh air day once in a while and go for a walk.
I see.
It was cold today. I had to go. Now my dog is 6 months old, so he wants to go every morning. It is played in. Doesn't matter if it's hailing or not. It is my duty. All right. Well, with that, I pretty much have all that well, no, we haven't talked about going through the class yet this week, but this coming week. So to this, any questions? How are you feeling about this material? Any comments, please? Silence. That's either a good sign or a really bad sign. Is there any people on the call still, or am I almost alone? Hello.
Yeah.
We're here.
All right, good.
The challenging part for me was really just seeing the diagrams and actually trying to figure out what the diagrams were indicating on the muscles, just because there's so much overlap and layering.
Yes, that's hard. Yeah, that's
follow it was the challenge.
You know, that's also really hard for me clinically, like working with the people. It takes a long time for me to learn, am I pressing a semispinalis or a splenius? And if I'm really honest about it, I still can't tell you if I always know the difference. I mean, I know the attachment difference. I can find them. I can be more or less mostly sure. And then the muscle test works better afterwards. I know I did the right stuff, but it is really difficult to differentiate all these little suckers. Yeah. So don't feel like bad if it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I mentioned it in the Padlet. I thought the cadaver videos were amazing.
Aren't those cool?
Really helpful for that as well. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to make sure you guys under the lecture go down and there is these pro study tips and check out the cadaver clips. I put them into every muscle too. Just watch one. I mean, it's anatomy, it's your own body. It's going to be all right. They don't show the face and all that gross stuff. They really go right to the point of what we're looking at, right?
It's pretty gross.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But you have a nice British guy explaining it, so it's all.
Yeah. Yes. And is that his son modeling? Who is
I
that?
think so. It's Mr. Suit. It's hilarious.
That cracked me up. Him and
it's a really
leotard.
good series. It's a 4 or 5 CD DVD series that slowly made it onto the internet more and more.
It is amazing.
No, you should, if you can handle it, please check it out. The other thing, if you're a visual person, also when you go to this flashcard thing, is a PDF, and every muscle is individually drawn, and you can sort of label and draw it from there, or cut it out, make flashcards, something like that. So just check that out too. Potentially might be helpful. Again, they don't need to be, but play with it and see what works for you. And then my favorite muscle picture is an electronic. Don't print that one out, because I put pretty much all the muscles that I got to know, or, you know, clinically, and I think is good to know, on one sheet of paper.
Mhm.
And so you can zoom in. If you can zoom in, you get to the different muscles. And, you
Oh.
know, and it's really cool the way that this book is a German book, of course, the, you know, the engineer people. The way that they looked, we just looked at that suboccipital triangle here, how you see the muscle attachment and then just a line, and then another one, you can really visualize where the muscle is. So that might be helpful, potentially, if you can read my writing, but it's somewhat self-explanatory, I think. Well, once you study it, at least. So anyway, it's a visual medium, right? You want to feel it, you want to picture it, you want to draw it, you want to, and then what we also going to do is we're going to use it. So we're going to do in this session this week, we're going to, for 2 weeks. So we're going next week, or this week, we're going to do upper extremity, and then next week we're going to do lower extremity. The amount of muscles is a little bit less. However, especially the upper extremity, the forearm muscle, make sure you spend some time on that, because it does get complex. And we go through it in class again. I make a study session and so forth, but make sure you go through that a few times. And if it's really bad, you can, no, it shouldn't be really bad. But if you want to have extra study sessions on that, me explaining it a few times, reach out. We could do that. There's no problem. Anyway, then we have a little bit of discussion, and then this is a 2-week health kit thing, an injury prevention evaluation that I created out of workshops that look at low cost, low equipment tests with high benefit and yield of what data do you get from them. And so what they did, and they used these tests on the Swiss Olympic team, for example, although I learned it in America. But my mom went to that clinic, and it was interesting. They used the same stuff. These are tests like standing on one leg and balancing. How long can you balance on one leg? And then you have normative data with them and see how long can you balance on one leg with your eyes closed and your eyes open. And if you don't balance that long, you got a little deficit on that. And balancing is very important. Now we're, of course, 20, it's fine. We fall down, it's it's goofy. But when we're 80 and we're falling down, it's a little bit harder to get back up. And so, and also as we grow older, the balancing, the nerves into the feet, they decrease. And you see, like in older people, you see often when it's dark outside, they can't feel anymore that much from the feet, and the visual goes away because it's dark. So their balancing is like they start walking wider steps, for example. But it is already important for us in youth. If we don't balance well, it behooves us to increase the balancing, because the more we create in youth, the more we can keep as we get older. So that's one test, for example. And so I have like another one that's really cool is the repetitive squat test. So when you learn the muscles of the leg, you might as well feel them. And so we go do some squats, and it explains the squats, and then it explains normative data, how many can you do. And if you don't have enough done, then that could be a part of your workout regimen, and you could do some to improve on that. And then you can retest yourself in a month's time or whatever, but you can individualize your workout if you feel like it. But at least what we can do in this section, we can identify if there's weaknesses that, like, if you go all of a sudden go do some sports after, a few years, if not, you make sure you don't get injured in those areas, because those are high risk sort of areas. We do a side bridge as well. So there's some muscle using muscles. And then we also have flexibility. How far can you raise up a leg? How tight are your hamstrings, for example? So it's not just muscle strength, it's also flexibility. And part of your workout routine, if you want to individualize it, has those components. It's got strength, it's got flexibility, it's got mobilization usually in it. And I work with people on some rehab stuff. So you go through these tests. It's 2 weeks long. It's a fair amount, so don't overburden it all at once. Obviously, if it hurts to do it, stop doing it. Text me or ask me, or right, but don't go through the pain. We don't need to do that. I first describe a little bit the biomechanics in sort of, it was interesting having to explain what I do functionally to people that don't speak my language at all, and I don't speak their language at all. And so I got basically back with, bones are like Lego pieces that stick on top of one another. There's rubber bands that hold them together. They can snap or overstretch. Muscles move everything around, and the brain talks to all the muscles. So that's my explanation of what I do. And my job, not in anatomy, but in clinically, is try to figure out which part is broken and which part can I make better, functionally better. And so I talk a little bit about the biomechanics of how the system sort of works, the muscle bone system, and what can go raunchy and what do we want to make better. And some of the stuff is pretty novel. I mean, this weak muscle question is interesting, because in medicine, they only think you got to go to the gym and strengthen it, but it's not just that. It's also engaging it and using it as the head, and walking, for example, barefoot around in an uneven surface to have the ankle flexibility and agility come back, and not just go to the gym and passively strengthen a muscle, just because it's one muscle. So it's more integrated. Anyway, so we're sort of going through that, and then let's see what else we do at the end. Oh, look, we have some questions, and then we have some implementations, and like, make a routine, a little 5-minute routine, and do it for a week as an implementation. And then you upload all of that stuff. And this is in 2 weeks. This is not next week. So make sure you look at it. Don't just wait till the end, because the deadline, I hope the deadline is right. Yeah, see, the 19th, the deadline is out. Do look at it early, because it might take you a couple sessions to get through it. Okay. All right. And that's it, I think. Good. Any questions?
I have a question about the assignment where we had to have someone take a picture of us.
Oh, the home,
Yeah,
yeah. What about it?
I didn't have that.
Can you-
I was alone. My son's coming back home tonight though, so I could be able to submit it there.
Yeah, that's totally fine. And
Okay.
if anybody else says, just try to prop up the phone somehow and do the delayed picture thing or something. Just be creative. You don't have to upload the pictures. I just want you to have them to analyze,
Evaluate. Right.
evaluate it, and go through these points a little and know what's, ultimately the most important posture you probably noticed is the head forward thing, right? Pretty much everybody's got the chicken neck a little bit too much, and we want to bring back, because if you really look at posturally from a sitting, I brought that picture up with the 3 wheels from the side, and you want them lining up and not the middle one go back. And so that's really posturally the big deal at the end of the day. But I want you to look at it and also look at, is your head tilted a little? It's kind of interesting to see yourself, well, I'm worried because my head is so much forward and I teach this stuff. So
I learned that, I want to say it's in your class, that if you lean forward, that standing up straight, the weight of your head is 12 pounds, but when you lean forward, it's 42.
It gets, the further forward it gets, the heavier it gets for the muscle
it gets
to hold them up. And that's interesting. I mean, that's where I think, to me, doing a posture, doing an evaluation of your workstation, it might be a little tedious. But at the end, what's really most important is the gravity question. How much can we balance everything on top of one another without having to use muscles that pull it up and hold it up? And that's like that because then we don't use that much energy. Right. And we get more out of it. And so the gravity going down, that's the fundamental discussion point in those.
Cool. So that was probably the only thing. And then we have assignments that requires the labs, right?
No, not yet.
It's just okay.
It's all just label and coloring. It's label, coloring, and health kit. And you guys going through the studies, you guys work with those terms and familiar more and more. And because the test is basically I'm pointing to things and say, what is this called? What is this called? And you have to write it down or type
Right.
it
Okay.
all on that list. So that's really you guys' job, besides doing the physical thing. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions that come up? Because if not, we can close it out. I think we did pretty good. And just reach out if you have a question, if you want to talk, if you want to process some more. I'm here for you guys. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Sorry for being late.
That's all right. That's all right. Thank you for joining in. Appreciate
I
it.
went to I go to kinesiology 58A and I just
Oh.
haven't been feeling it in the morning these days.
Mhm.
And so I got up today and I went
Hate
still,
it?
even with I didn't even feel like it. So even, I told my friend, he's like, "You going out to work out?" I said, "Yeah." Even though I don't feel like it, that's even more of enough reason to go because I
That's
don't feel like
good.
going.
That's good. And now you have the benefits.
Yeah. So, and I learned too that we can't eat 2 hours before the gym.
Well,
No,
yeah,
it's 2 hours
you want to
after.
make, I guess, no, before more, because you want to make sure the blood is not used to digest your food. And if you use muscles and the blood is still used to digest your food, you're not giving the food the proper digesting things, right? So
Right.
you're not utilizing the best you can, because that goes into then when we look at the nervous system, the
Mhm.
parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So working out is like an action thing. You're running, you're fighting, you know, that kind of energy. And food and eating is more like a relaxing and calming down and giving the energy to the stomach. The
Right.
body has to divert. Where does the energy go? So you have to think a little bit like that sort of way.
Yeah, so basically the food is evaporating through the chyme, touching the chyme, and so it's
Well,
not
yeah, but
properly.
if you don't give the body the proper vascularity, for example, then the body doesn't do that much.
Right.
It's sort of, and so, and also that, and it's before, because after workout you do, I don't have it the data in my head really, but you do want to eat after because you want to replenish.
Mm.
So look at that stuff or talk to your kinesiology person.
I think we actually talk about stuff like that in nutrition 10.
Good. Yeah, nutrition. I took nutrition too. It's very good.
You know what class I'm having a hard time in?
Nope.
Biology 10.
Yeah, I've never taught that.
That class is really complicated, and more so doing that article analyst, I've always had complications with. I understand the material, but to put it in my own words, I get writer's block horribly.
Have you looked at talking to the tutoring center?
I am going to do that today.
Yeah, because I think they're trying really hard to offer tutoring, and I should be a little bit more outspoken in this class. They have tutors that are Zoom tutors. You know, you just go to their website and see what.
And you register for Learn 101.
Yes.
And it's free. You don't, it's not required to gain any credits or anything like that. And like you said,
if you
it's
have
on
problem
Zoom.
with writing, you know, I felt terrified about writing until I took an English class, and actually ended up being quite okay my writing, because English is not my first language, so that was sort of a block. But if you have somebody that can help you over some of those blocks and get into your own stuff, then that's all you need, you know, and then you could be all right. Yeah. Well, they help you get over those kind of, you know, things that we need to develop a little more, or sometimes it's just anxiety around something we don't can, but we're actually good at it as long as we have somebody holding our hands a little bit.
Just a tiny bit.
Yep, exactly. All right, I think we're all good, huh? I think we're all good. Have a wonderful week and reach out if you need anything. I'm here.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Munninghouse. I mean, Dr. Munninghouse.
Yeah, something, whatever.
Peace out. Have a good day.
Peace out.